after e4, d5, we take the pawn, and now we're looking at knight f6 setup. So in this video we're going to go through a lot of things we haven't seen yet. So as we know now, we play bishop b5 check, and one thing we haven't seen is c6. So how to deal with this? This is basically a gambit. The idea of the black player is to gain it on development. So now here we take the pawn, and there's two ways to take back. Either with the pawn starting another attack on this bishop, forcing us to move again, or knight developing. Let's start with pawn taking. Right, this comes with an attack on the bishop. The bishop will have to move again. Bishop c4 is well placed. And now we're going to look at the best moves that our opponent can possibly make. Bishop g4 is the most active reply. Comes with an attack on this queen. Here he played knight to f3. Develop, because obviously we don't want to waste too much time. There's no point in playing f3 at this point. And here we have an idea. If it's our move again, we will play bishop f7 check, king takes, knight e5 check, and then you will take the bishop. We all know this tactic, and you win 2 pawns. I mean, you're up 3 pawns. It's a fantastic position. So if e5 comes, for example, take, and then check, and yeah, whatever our opponent wants to do, completely winning game for white. So in this position, what if black plays e6? This is the obvious move here. Okay, castle. Bishop d6, developing. d4. All of these moves are kind of forced. Castle and now h3. Okay, what to do? Obviously, taking is stupid for black because then we take back and we've got great position. Also we have a material advantage. So our opponent will have to at least try to preserve the bishop pair. Now we play bishop to e2. Obviously, when there's a pawn in e6, your bishop needs to return to e2 or maybe d3. So let's look at this move. c5 with the idea of taking our central pawn and get rid of this isolated pawn. Here we take, and after bishop takes back, the bishop is well placed. But here we're happy to swap pieces. So remember, if you get a chance in this position to swap pieces, there's no compensation for black here. You're just winning. Knight b d2. Let's look at a few moves and then we will close this line. Knight to c6, c3. Stops the knight from going anywhere in the future to d4 or b4. And let's look at this. Rook to d6 now with the idea of doubling up. Also, rook to d7 seems to be making sense, but now bishop to b5. You're pinning the knight to the rook, so that's not good. The rook will have to go to c8 to protect the knight, but then you will still take, and after take back, you got the knight going to e5. So in this position, rook to d6, an attempt of doubling up, but there's nothing to do. There are no moves, no ideas for our opponent. I mean, because we have this passed pawn in c3, so you play b4 now, bishop e6, knight to c4, attacking the two of them. So the rook will have to be prioritized. Rook d7 and now a4, threatening to keep pushing. Obviously, we're advancing the pawns. Rook a to d8. Fine, g4. All of these moves are forced. This whole game is so easy to remember. Bishop g6, knight f to e5. And now we're attacking the rook, the bishop. So it makes sense for our opponent to take us, but still, we're going to take back. And after rook to c7, getting out of trouble, a5 pins the bishop. So obviously that was not possible, so the rook will have to go somewhere else. But a5 is going to happen no matter what. This is a completely winning endgame. We could also choose to take the bishop in g6 at some point. So let's make a recap. Remember that if this doesn't look like I'm explaining too many variations, it's because there's already been like 4 or 5 videos about this early knight f6 move. And so go check them out, and there's so much stuff. Here I'm going a little bit faster, the reason being that we've seen so much and there's only a little things left to see. So bishop e5, c6 type of idea. There's also a video I made called Beat the Scandinavian Gambit. That gives you a lot of insight on something very similar to this. Take the pawn, and let's look at knight takes. Okay, same thing, going with development, knight f3. Let's look at 2 main ideas here. So bishop g4 straight away is met with simple attack on the bishop. And now h3, bishop h5, castle. And after e6, it's a very similar game, right? d4, bishop d6. All these moves will happen because this gambit doesn't do anything, right? Because it's a Scandinavian opening defense. It's a passive opening. So this gambit, it's just not going anywhere. c3 comes now, okay? Now, obviously, here there's 2 ideas. Either castle or bishop takes. None of them works. Let's make an example. If our opponent does take this knight, right? Queen takes. This is a completely stupid move because your opponent is losing the bishop pair. So queen to c7 now. Okay, bishop to g5. Double attack on this knight. Knight to d5 is met with the usual c4. The knight will have to move again. Knight to b4, going for c2, trapping the rook. Not gonna happen. d5. And the knight is pinned, so we're winning material. If our opponent takes us, then this king is not gonna live long. a6, maybe counter-attacking. Okay, we take the knight, and when they take our piece, okay, now we're taking b7. Rook to b8, and now our opponent will be able to recapture that pawn. However, you're taking b5. And we have extra pawn. Worst case scenario, you can just play knight c3, and then this rook is not going to get trapped, and you're going to push a4 as well. It's completely winning. So if I don't know, queen b7, you have an idea of play. Well, first maybe swap, rook takes, and then a4. It's awesome. If our opponent instead, I don't know, plays knight to c2, trapping for the rook, this is not possible because queen c6 wins. There's nothing to do. If the queen takes us, then we take back, and we don't care about the rook. Because if the knight takes the rook, then rook c1. And we're winning. The king can't move anywhere. We're going to be able to push c7, and then it's unstoppable. So in this position, instead of taking the rook, what if our opponent instead plays f6? Giving some breathing space to the king. Okay, bishop e3. And now knight takes rook. Okay, fine. Knight to a3. We're recapturing this knight, and the knight can't go to c2 because we will take it. But we don't even care. Because black's best move now, king e7, the idea of activating the last rook is met with rook to c1. We don't even capture that one. Also because even if our opponent takes our knight, taken our knight, and then we take back, we had a plan of playing bishop to a7 and win the rook, and then play rook c1 no matter what. So bishop c7 now. What about this? We can't push the pawn. Well, fine, knight b5. And that should do. By the way, in this position, after queen c6 check, what if our opponent instead moves the king? It looks like we can't really do anything. If we take here, the bishop takes back, and our rook is still trapped. Okay, here we play rook to c1, and we're going to take that knight. So now, if black takes our queen, then pawn takes back, and knight takes rook is a transposition from what happened before. You can just play c6, where first knight a3 is the most accurate move, and then c7, and it's a transposition, basically. If our opponent instead takes our rook now, well, now check. Queen takes d6 is the best move. Boom. How about that? We're winning the queen, and well, the queen can't just protect, so the queen will have to take us, but now the rook is coming down here, and the king can't move anywhere, so this has to be taken, but then we're promoting. Or even if the queen blocks, we can just take it for free and then promote next move. So let's take this from the start and go through the other line. Bishop check, c6, take. Knight takes, which is what we're looking at. Knight f3. Okay, bishop g4, you attack it straight away. Bishop h5, castle. e6, d4. Bishop to d6, c3. And now instead of bishop takes f3, you can see how our opponent loses the chances. Rather, let's go on with castling. Okay, knight to d2. Rook to c8, all normal moves. We've seen them so many times playing against the Scandinavian. Rook e1, a6. Okay, the bishop goes back to e2. No, absolutely no reason to give the bishop for that knight. Okay, bishop to b8. Let's look at this idea. The idea of queen d6 and put pressure on this diagonal. Knight to b3 is the best move. h6, stopping bishop g5, pinning the knight. Knight to c6 is the best move now. Besides, we're also attacking this pawn, and the pawn can't push because we have an attack on a6. So queen to c7 now, protecting and placing the queen that square. g3, obviously we can't allow bishop takes knight because of the weakness on h2. So g3 comes now to defend that. Okay, knight to d7, swap it with our tremendously well placed knight. Bishop to f4, that does the job. e5, okay, we're gonna take. And now we're attacking this bishop, so we're gonna be up in material. So our opponent is forced to take us bishop in e2, and now we ignore it and we take the knight in d7. It discovers an attack on this queen. It's crazy, but if you remember this, your opponent will be shocked, and you won't have to think that much. Okay, bishop takes queen, we take their queen. So now rook to e8 is the best move in order to save the rook from the attack of the knight. Okay, rook takes the bishop back, and now when the bishop recaptures us, best move is knight takes in b7. We're winning that pawn, and then we're going to play king to g2. So for example, a knight to e7. Obviously trading is detrimental for our opponent. King to g2 is the best move. There is nothing here. We've got a huge majority on the queen side, and let's drop the line here. So let's go from the start once again, because now we have to see one last thing. So after the check and c6 you take, and then after knight c6 you know you have to play knight f3. What happens when our bishop is immediately attacked with a6? Okay, take back, we've achieved the broken pawn structure of our opponent, isolated pawn. So castle, and after bishop to g4, d3, in order to quickly develop the other bishop. Okay, we wrap a pawn, and the gambit of our opponent didn't do absolutely nothing to us. And here, the usual thematic move is queen to d5. The idea is to take, and then break up pawn structure and double up and isolate these pawns. But you can just play knight d2, and the knight will be safeguarding the knight. So let's look at this idea, and then we can close this video. When the bishop takes the knight and queen takes back, queen to d5 is there to try and reunify the pawn structure. Okay. Knight to d2 comes now, obviously to protect the queen. There's no reason, we're not going to fix the pawn in pawn structure. So let's close the line after just showing these normal moves. One of them e6, so the other one queen takes, and see how to take it from there. e6, queen to h3 is the best move. Bishop d6, you'll see why in a second. Knight to c4 attacks the bishop. And now, okay, castle is not possible because knight b6 makes a fork to the queen and rook. So after rook b8, best move, b3. Stopping the rook from putting pressure on b2 eventually. And after castle, bishop b2. Okay, knight d7. Okay, we take the bishop. Queen takes back. This is just us simplifying in a one endgame. Our opponent playing the absolute best moves and us just winning anyway. Rook a to e1. Rook f to e8. Rook e4. This is the plan. We're just going to go... Okay, rook to b5 is the best move by black. Rook f to e1. We're doubling up. And after rook to a5, going for this pawn. These are just computer moves, but there's no progress that can be made. a3. And e5 by black, best move, d4. Right, we're going to close the line here because it's just too crazy to continue that long. I just wanted to finish the repertoire of Scandinavian by giving as much advice as possible. In this position, if the queen does take out queen, the knight takes back. It looks like a boring game where there's not much happening. However, the opponent has a weakness. The pawn is e6. So e6, rook e1. Bishop to d6. Okay, knight e5. We're happy about that swap. Let's make an example. If take, we're simplifying. And after castling, how do we win this game? Rook a5. Rook f to d8, for instance, activating the rook. Rook to c5. This is just our opponent playing. I recognize this is between all of my videos where I speak so much and I give so many ideas. And this video is definitely the most computerish. This is because when the game gets passive, you gotta play only extremely accurate moves to win. And yeah, eventually here the plan is to simply play bishop g5 and then carry on and get the other rook to play, exploiting the weaknesses of the isolated pawns.